The United Nations Human Rights Council has urged global action, including reparations, to make amends for racism against people of African descent. Its new report also urges educational reforms and apologies to address discrimination. The findings cite concerns in about 60 countries, including the UK, Belgium, France, Canada, Brazil, and Colombia. The study began after the murder of George Floyd, an unarmed black man in U.S. police custody in 2020. In a statement on Monday, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, called on all states to stop denying and start dismantling racism and listen to the voices of people of African descent. And joining me now via Skype from Washington, D.C. for more on reparations for acts depicting racism is the Executive Director of the Congressional Black Caucus Institute, Vanessa Griddine-Jones. Good to have you join us.
Thank you for having me.
We know that in April, the Black Caucus, the Judiciary Committee, House Judiciary Committee did move forward with something like this, being able to come up with an agreement to have a commission that studies reparations. Where is that now? Talk to us about what is being done.
There are still discussions with that in committee. The issue here with Congress, and I'm not speaking for the Congressional Black Caucus because the entity is, CBCI is a separate entity, but the issue here at the moment of getting anything out of Congress, any legislation of any form, is the hyperpartisanship that currently exists. And until we get to the root of what's causing this hyperpartisanship between the House and the Senate, and just in America in general, then no legislation is going to move in any direction.
But what role basically do you think that reparations, which is basically some level of compensation for people who experienced racism during the slave trade, and then there were also issues around, it keeps coming up every time in the U.S. and people wonder what role this plays in terms of dismantling racism.
I think it was a good effort. The Congressional Black Caucus Institute is a part of the United Nations Economic and Social Council. So that allows us to have a space to talk about issues that affect the African diaspora, and particularly those here in America. But the statement and the report, they're all symbolic. And we appreciate the efforts, but unless we have real action behind that, I don't know that reparations is the resolution for this. We've had apologies, we've tried to correct some wrongs by tearing down things that remind us of the Confederacy. But I think it's difficult to have reparations and restitution in a place where you weren't contemplated into the fiber of the establishment of the country in the first place. So you're asking, to be included someplace where you weren't included, as opposed to now re-including me in the process. So I don't know how far this will go. I don't know that reparations, as she's called for it, is going to help, because I don't know how you repair and reconcile what has been done to now.
But let's talk about something you said earlier. You said black voters want what everybody wants: housing, education, healthcare, to take care of themselves and families, safe places for us to be. You just talked about, fixing something that has already been done. But how about preventing future injustices? Where should this begin?
I think the legislation will help that you were referring to about the judiciary. There has to be a truth and reconciliation. So as you mentioned earlier, there are countries that are still in denial about the fact that there's discrimination going on against people of African descent. And I think during this current decade of the International People of African Descent, to recognize that it's a good step. But there is so many years of wrong that has been committed and atrocities that I don't know how we undo it. And I'm being honest. I know we sit around and we have all these conversations and commissions and reports and task forces on how this can happen. But I don't know that the conversations we're having we're having them with the right people. And unless there's recognition that this actually did happen, I don't know how we move forward.
Hopefully there is a way forward, because this is a conversation that everyone needs to have. Reparations and then stemming future injustices just all around the world. Thank you so much for talking to us. Vanessa Griddine-Jones, the Executive Director of the Congressional Black Caucus Institute.